for confirming. So thank you everyone for joining the session. I think we have a really outstanding group of CEOs and founders of some of the leading food tech companies in the world today. So very appreciative for all three of our speakers. And so I will quickly turn it over to them to jumpstart the session. I just wanted to make one or two remarks up front. One is just introduce myself. My name is Jed Lynch. I lead our Sustainable and Impact Banking group at Barclays. So we're super excited to be a part of SOCAP again this year, and are really excited about the group that's assembled for this conference and really trying to grow and scale the impact investing community. One thing I would point out is one link that connects our three speakers today is a program we have at Barclays called Unreasonable Impact. And it's a program we've had now in place since 2016, and it's a program we created with the Unreasonable group, tied to helping entrepreneurs scale solutions to some of the biggest environmental challenges we see in the world today. It's a global program. It happens 3 times a year, and since the launch in 2016, we've been able to support 120 ventures. Companies that have gone through it that have reached over 220 million customers worldwide. And so these statistics get more and more impressive as we get each cohort going through the program. But it's really one of the things at Barclays that we're most proud about. And we were privileged to have all three of the CEOs and founders on the panel today to participate in that program, with Andy most recently, and then Lisa and Arturo in 2017, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. So crazy how time flies. And so with that, I'll quickly just give you their quick titles and a one-line sentence on their companies, and then I will turn it over to them to share a little bit more about the exciting things they're all doing as a company. And so starting, I guess, with Annie Roof, she's the CEO of the Jackfruit company, which is converting an underutilized miracle crop, jackfruit, to delicious, nutritious food. We're also joined by Arturo Elizondo, who is the CEO of Clara Foods, which is a biotech company creating the very first animal-free egg, which I'll let him explain it in more detail. And last but certainly not least, we have Lisa Dyson, who's the CEO and founder of a business called Airprotein, which is creating the world's very first air-based protein. And so with that introduction, I'll turn it over to Annie to tell us a little bit more about Jackfruit.
All right, sounds good. Can you all hear me? Okay, I'm gonna. Yes. Yeah, that's okay, perfect. So one of the first talks I'm giving on Zoom, but I still have to ask a question to the audience. So how many of you have ever been asked, if you knew then what you know now, if you knew just how hard it would be, would you still have done it? It's not an uncommon question if you're, a CEO, founder. I've been asked the question a number of times, and as an entrepreneur, founder, CEO, there's really one right answer, and the answer is yes. But if I really think about the question, what it's taken to get here, who I was when I started this, what I thought it would be like, the answer is no. I just think it's the wrong question, because it's not about who you were. It's about who you are. It's about who you've become because of what it's taken to get here. So if you ask me, am I proud of where we are today? The answer is yes. And I'm proud of who this company has made me become. So I'm just going to try to share my screen, and just bear with me for one moment here. All right, let's try this. All right. Can you guys see my screen? Actually, I can't hear any of you now, so we're gonna roll with it. So I lead the Jackfruit company. The market that we're after is the meat market.
We can't see your screen.
You can't see my screen.
No.
Oh no!
Sorry.
But I clicked on the thing already. Let's try this one more time. What about now?
No, I'm sorry.
We
can see your face though very well, if that helps.
Well, I literally clicked on the The same thing we just talked through. That's no good. How about, that's weird. Still no. Well, sorry, let me try one more thing here.
Annie?
Yep.
Hi. So if you click on it, you should get a window that says share your application, share your window. Or
that's what I got. Yeah.
And then one of those, you got to click on it. Click on what you want to
I did.
share.
No, I did that as well. I've done that a few times, but
okay.
Doesn't look like it's working.
I'll jump off so you can keep going and maybe drop a link to your presentation in the chat.
All right. Yeah, that's interesting. I guess you guys might, I guess I'll keep it fairly brief since it doesn't look like my PowerPoint is gonna come over. But basically where we're at is we're going after the meat market, and the meat market is $1.4 trillion globally. The plant-based meat market is expected to exceed $100 billion by 2035, primarily driven by health and wellness and secondarily by the environment and animal welfare. If you think about where plant-based meats have come from to where they are today, started off with soy foods becoming popular with tofu, 1960s, 1970s. 1980s and 90s, veggie burgers became popular. You started to see Boca Burger, Garden Burger, and then vegetarian brands developed into offering a lot of different foods for different occasions, from Tofurkey to Light Life, Morningstar, Field Roast, and then most recently, new brands using technology to cater to meat eaters, so the Beyond Meat, Impossible, and a number of the lookalikes. And so over this whole trajectory, you've really gone from, if you think about like a black bean burger, to these whole plants that were not very meat-like, where the burger is kind of coming out the back of the bun even as you're trying to eat it, to products that are very meat-like, but are also quite highly processed. And if we look at the different items that are out there, part of what I mean by highly processed is that top two ingredients are virtually always water and powder. And that's something that kind of goes against this idea of just looking for putting more plants in your diet. So really what we're about at the Jackfruit company is a real plant that eats just like meat. It has this meaty texture just the way it grows on a tree. And I wish I could really show you pictures of just the different ways that we can prepare jackfruit, because it really will blow your mind, the fact that it isn't meat, that it is just this way, the way it grows in nature. Jackfruit as a food is good for you. It's good for farmers. It's good for the planet. I started this company because jackfruit, native to India, super abundant there, was primarily going to waste just for lack of any kind of supply chain or any kind of product development to introduce how amazing this food is to the world. So we as a company began to enable farmers to make massive incremental income from this amazing resource. And so we've really pioneered a supply chain, pioneered the R&D that didn't exist, to really create what we believe is a food system of the future, something that is good for people and good for the planet globally. Our model is that we actually are a food tech company inventing and applying technology to enable real food rather than to engineer it. And what that means for us is developing unique crop varietals, using crop mapping technologies, harvesting systems, custom developing and automating fruit preparation technologies, and food preparation technologies. And our specialized expertise in jackfruit R&D and supply enables this real plant platform to mimic all types of meat, from ground meat to seafood, to pulled meat, and whole muscle, whether cooked or raw. And that's really something that we're enabled to do from the fact that we're working from end to end on the supply chain, really from farm to fork, connecting directly with the farmers and directly with consumers. In terms of where we stand today, we are by far the leading brand for jackfruit, with consumers, customers, manufacturers across the industry. 70% of all retail jackfruit product sales in the United States, top 10 brand in the refrigerated plant-based meat segment. Some of our customers include Whole Foods, Sprouts, Kroger, Safeway, Publix, H-E-B, Costco, Cisco. And at the same time as that in-market presence, we are the largest buyer of jackfruit in the world, with over 1,000 farmer partners and a global top-tier manufacturing network. So yeah, I'm really sorry not to be able to show the slides, but I'm excited to share some of our journey with you. And where we're headed is we're about to bring out some very, very major innovation. I'm not able to show it yet, but it will really change the way that people think about jackfruit and what this amazing food can do. So looking forward to showing it to you in store soon. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Annie. I'm gonna try and share my screen as well. And for those who are looking at the chat, feel free to send any questions to Annie over chat as well. And also, as questions come up for my session, please ask them away, and then we'll answer them towards the end of the panel. So I'm gonna try and share my screen. Hopefully, you all can see it. Let me know.
Yep, we can see it.
Awesome. And then you can double click on the slides, and they should open up to have you see the full slides. So you can maximize the video that way. All right, so hi everyone, I'm Arturo, founder and CEO of Clara Foods. And our approach is a little different from Annie's in that we are a food biotech company, really making proteins using fermentation. And as you can see, our mission is really to decouple the world's most powerful proteins from the animals that historically have made them. And so we do that using fermentation. And a big reason why we even go about using this technology is because we acknowledge that number one is that the world is completely addicted to animal protein. 70% of the US American protein diet is from animals today. And that's only expected to grow as developing countries continue to have a greater and greater middle class that is buying more and more animal protein. One of the most common protein sources on the planet from animals are eggs. And the world today consumes over 1 trillion eggs every single year. And obviously, like with meat and other animal-based products and proteins, is that they're incredibly inefficient to produce. And now we fortunately have seen a wave of alternative proteins making their way into the mainstream, and really having a lot of consumers be excited about the health, environmental, and eventually economic benefits of adopting a more plant-based alternative protein diet. And so with this huge progress, one of the things that we're seeing as well is that sometimes it is challenging to find to have a product really have the taste, the texture, and the properties, the mouthfeel that we grew up knowing and loving. And some plants can do this very well, and sometimes for certain applications like baking, making omelets, making a lot of different animal products, sometimes there's still a gap. And so the question we raise is, what is it going to take for the world to truly transition to a fully animal-free future? And that's where we come in as Clara. And so to answer that is that we go about making real animal protein without using a single animal. So protein that has the same taste and nutrition and functionality benefits of the animal proteins that people are eating every single day, but without ever having to kill or grow an animal. And the way that we do that is by using fermentation. And so as crazy as it sounds to make real animal proteins without using a single animal, it's been around for decades. And actually the first ever animal protein made without using an animal was 40 years ago to make insulin. Insulin used to come from pigs. And so in order to make insulin prior to the 80s, you had to harvest the pig, grow it, kill it, and then open up their pancreas and extract the insulin protein, purify it, and then inject it into people. And that's how every diabetic got their insulin protein from. It wasn't kosher, it wasn't halal. There were a lot of issues with it from a supply chain and safety standpoint. And so companies began using synthetic biology to make these proteins. And fast forward to today, almost 98, 99% of the insulin produced in the world today is made using fermentation instead of pigs. You needed over 50,000 pigs to make 1 kilo of insulin protein. So talk about inefficiency. And so it was quickly when the rest of the food industry took note and actually made its way into cheese. Because I don't know if many of you know, but cheese actually wasn't vegetarian up until the 1990s, because the protein used to curdle the milk to make cheese at industrial levels could only be found in the fourth stomach of baby cows. So you had to grow a baby cow, kill it after a few days, extract the rennet protein from their fourth stomach, and then add that to milk to get it to curdle to make cheese at industrial levels. And also incredibly inefficient process. And so the industry took note and thought, well, we can replace the pig for instance protein production. Let's use this technology to actually replace the rennet for cheese for cheese production. Fast forward to today, and around over 90% of cheese in the US is made using rennet from fermentation, and around 80% of the cheese worldwide, including Europe, is using this technology to make most cheeses in the world today. And so we at Clara saw this opportunity and said, well, look, as a world, we've already replaced the pig for insulin protein production. We've replaced the chicken, we've replaced the baby cow for rennet protein production. And then we thought at Clara, well, can we replace the chicken for egg protein production? And can we replace animals more broadly from the protein production complex? And so over the last 6 years, since we founded the company, we've been on that journey. And one of the beauties of fermentation is that it allows us to completely bypass the animal production process. And so instead of having to grow a chicken, wait 12 to 18 weeks for it to start laying eggs, get those eggs, sometimes, especially when it comes to end consumers, separating them in terms of the yolk and the egg white, sometimes even throwing away the yolk, is that it's an incredibly inefficient process. Also subject to salmonella, incredibly problematic supply chain, avian flu, and then also batch-to-batch variation. And so by actually engineering microbes to produce the exact same proteins, leveraging, essentially hacking them like computers to use the same genetic material that animals use or that any organism uses, which is DNA, to produce specific kinds of proteins, allows us to have a supply chain that is incredibly stable, but also affords us a lot more benefits, especially food safety, as our supply chains become more compromised, especially in light of COVID. Sustainability by using less land, water, and energy inputs, and then ultimately allowing those to be completely animal-free and have a price stability, like that we can negotiate pricing over multiple years in a way that is almost unimaginable in the animal protein space today. And so one of the things that I'm most excited about regarding the fermentation space is that there's an incredible white space available. So if you all ate an egg this week, you all ate over 200 proteins that are in that egg, in every single egg that we consume. And so many of us don't even know what the proteins do. Some of these proteins have not even been named before. And so what our fermentation allows us to do is that we create these proteins individually and allow us to actually look at food at the molecular level for the first time in this way, and allows us to actually pick and choose and create new proteins and new ingredients and mix and match some of these proteins that we can design for the end user. And so there's an unprecedented level of customizability, because if you think about an egg wasn't really meant for humans to eat. It was literally the proteins there, and everything in the egg is supposed to sustain the life of a baby chick. And so some of those proteins are not necessarily the best for humans. Some of them are very good, but some of them aren't. And so how do we leverage the most advanced, the most up-to-date nutrition science and research that we know to understand how we can actually design food that is best for the planet and best for us as humans? and in the process, be able to develop products that don't exist today, that have enhanced functionalities, like increased solubility, so you don't have to add all this sugar and artificial sweeteners to protein drinks. Instead, have protein beverages that are much cleaner for athletes to consume, or have the angel food cake that your grandma makes every Christmas, and allowing it to have more foam stability, because we can dial up the proteins that have that foam and decrease the ones that bind to create lighter and fluffier kinds of baked goods that use less sugar. And so we've built a pipeline over the last 5 years, and we've actually already commercialized our first product, which we expect to be profitable in the next few months. And we'll be launching the next set of proteins in the pipeline that will be public over the next few months. And so with that, thank you. If you have any questions, please ask them over the chat, and we can address them at the end. You're on mute, Lisa. Lisa, I think you're on mute.
A lot of great things to say while I was on mute, but thanks, Arturo. Really appreciate letting me know, and great presentation. All right, so I'm going to talk about a different protein solution as well. So Airprotein is the name of my company, and I'll actually start by giving a little bit of history about myself. So my mom is actually from Louisiana, and I had many wonderful summer months going to visit cousins in Louisiana, playing in the woods and getting eaten up, essentially, sort of bitten by monster ants and all those other things. Even one time, my aunt dressed up like a ghost because the kids wouldn't go to sleep, and she was floating around the house in a white gown. And I didn't actually know it was her until I was in college. But many, many fun summer months in Louisiana. In 2005, I went back to Louisiana. This time, it was not to play with my cousins, but it was actually after Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005. And I was one of the many people that went there to try to help rebuild the city after that major devastation. And it was really significant what I saw and what we all saw. People essentially were refugees looking for shelter, looking for safety. People lost their lives, they lost their homes, they lost their loved ones, and the community was in shambles. So thinking about just having experienced this weather event later in life, and as a scientist by training, I was thinking about climate science and how climate science predicts that we're going to have more intense storms and more frequent storms, once in 100-year storms happening much more frequently. And in addition to that, there'll be other consequences of climate change. One of them I'm in the midst of experiencing here in California, where one day we woke up to a orange sky, essentially. Many weeks we couldn't go outside because the air was so bad. And that's because of the intense fires that we've been seeing here in California. So extended drought seasons, droughts where we hadn't seen them before, and fires as a result of those droughts is something that climate change is also affecting. So in thinking about these issues, really as a scientist, the question that I had was, how could I be a part of the solution? What can I do to kind of help, having seen this devastation of a weather event up close and personal, how can I keep people from being affected by such things in the future? And non-governmental bodies have a role in this to play. Regulatory bodies have a role, policymakers have a role. And I'm a scientist by training. And so the question was, could I look to science to try to help this situation? And definitely in the box thinking is what got us to where we are today. So how could we think outside the box? And what better place to go to or look at it other than NASA, where they literally think outside the planet in trying to solve problems. And one of the problems that they were trying to address in the 60s and 70s involved the question, how do we send astronauts on long space journeys successfully? And there are many things that one would have to figure out to make those journeys successful. And one of them is how to produce food for astronauts. And that's actually the same question as asking how to recycle carbon. because we are a carbon-based life form. We need carbon to survive, and we get it through our food. So one of the ideas that they came up with involved the use of cultures that could actually capture carbon dioxide and convert it into nutrients. And so the process would be that the astronauts are constantly breathing out, and they're breathing out carbon dioxide. You would capture that carbon dioxide, you'd feed it to these cultures, which then could be used to create nutrients. And these nutrients could be used for food that the astronauts would then eat and then breathe out that carbon in the form of carbon dioxide. And so a closed loop carbon cycle could be created. So we thought it was a really good idea. And myself and a colleague, Dr. John Reed, really began to work on, how can we resurrect some of these ideas that NASA had and really actually create something that will be useful here on Earth, where we can actually take elements of the air, carbon dioxide, and also oxygen and elements of the air, and make a protein, a really nutritious protein. We worked on a number of years on doing that, and happily we were able to create a really nutrient-dense protein that has all the essential amino acids. It's also rich in bioavailable minerals such as iron and vitamins such as vitamin B12. And we're really excited about being able to do that and bring that to the world. So making protein from elements of the air. We've been working really on hitting all the metrics that one would need to make that economically attractive and something that you can really produce to feed the masses in a way that was not only nutritious, but would ultimately affordable as well. So one would then ask the question, if you were able to make a protein that is very nutritious and at scale is economically attractive, what should you do with that protein? And for that, we can look to this pandemic. And one of the things that we saw in this pandemic in particular, and that was the meat supply chain essentially broke. There were just the cases, the outbreaks that we saw at many of the different facilities, hundreds or thousands of people of workers infected, really was something that caused us to really meet our meat and really focus on the meat sector in particular. And one of the reasons why the meat supply chain broke, not just in the US, but in Canada and Brazil and Germany and many countries, we saw this happen at different times during this pandemic that we're in. One of the problems is just how meat is processed, the whole processing and packaging way of making your final finished meat product and delivering that to your home. And so the question that we ask is, can we think about meat differently? One of the other issues with meat is that if you go back to this climate change issue, which was really what caused me to go down this journey, meat is one of the largest contributors of greenhouse gases that we have. And if we look at the food industry as a whole, the food sector contributes more greenhouse gases than our planes, our trains, our trucks, and our cars combined. So that's a huge issue. And so we really ask the question, can we rethink meat? And so if we think about meat as, instead of just the product of a specific type of thing, an animal, we think instead as the textures and flavors that we enjoy when we sit down to a nice home cooked meal with our families, then can we think about meat differently and more broadly as our about eggs specifically in a different way. And if we look at the technology that's used today to make a steak, for instance, it takes 2 years to make a steak, and there's lots of greenhouse gases being emitted along the way, and lots of land being used, lots of water. And if we're able to create those textures and flavors in a better way, then this is an industry that's ripe for transformation, essentially. So last year, we made the world's first air-based meat, and we're able to make meat in a way that delivers textures and flavors that we're looking for when we sit down to that nice home-cooked meal, but that takes days instead of years to produce, and that uses no arable land to make that protein. And ultimately, it's the most sustainable way to make protein from a perspective of greenhouse gas, water utilization, and land utilization. And in fact, the cradle to plate carbon footprint for the meat made this way is negative. It's a carbon negative way to make meat. So why is this important? This is important because we not only have a large population that is eating lots of protein, but we're going to have an even larger population, 10 billion people by 2050. So we have to figure out ways of producing meat, particularly that's more sustainable. Right now, there's a lot of land in our food production process as a whole. And in fact, we've cleared an area the size of South America and Africa combined for modern agriculture. And if we just look back to last year, 2019 saw record fires in Brazil. And a lot of that, most of that, was to make room for cattle grazing. So where are we going to get all the land that we need in order to feed the populations as we grow? So by contrast, if you look at producing protein using this approach, our probiotic production process, it would take a soy farm the size of Texas to give you the same amount of protein that you get from an air protein farm the size of Walt Disney World. And so that's the benefit of a landless production process, no arable land required, where we're taking CO2 as a building for the proteins directly. So if we go back to this problem, this challenge that we are facing today, and there's many people working on many solutions to get us out of this climate change issue that we face, this climate change problem that we face, one has to think outside the box. And where, if you have problems that you're really focused on in your life, how can you think outside the box is a question for you. In our case, we've learned from NASA. We're literally stand on the shoulders of giants and have been able to develop a way of making meat that takes hours or days instead of months. We don't need sunlight to produce this protein, and we get more output per area and no arable land required for this production process. So as we think about our population growing, our crew, Earth is our spaceship, and we're traveling through the universe here on this spaceship, and our crew is growing to the tune of 10 billion people by 2050. So in general, we have to figure out ways of production that uses much less greenhouse or produces much less greenhouse gases. So we need to reduce our GHG footprint in our production processes, and we need to leave our habitats untouched. We can't reproduce what we saw last year in Brazil with those record fires. And that's what we're doing at Airprotein. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Arturo, Lisa, Annie, and Jed. I'll ask if all of you all will come back. I think Jed's still going to be with us too. I saw a couple of questions for him in the chat as well. And and please continue to drop your questions in. We'll go back and forth. But I've learned so much. That was absolutely amazing. I didn't know some of this was possible, so I'm really excited. Some of the questions that I'll start with, Jed, one of them, I feel like this is actually to the entire panel, but I think, Jed, you can step in here as well. Christy, if you want, you can press the blue button. You can come on camera if you're still there. But Christy asked, she's curious to hear from the panelists of how they connected with Barclays in order to get investment funding for their ventures.
Perfect. Yeah. And I tried to add Christy. I don't know if she showed up or not.
Let's see.
But I will answer that question. Well,
there she is.
Hi.
Hi, Christy.
Hi. So yeah, I work at Net Impact, which is a nonprofit, and I run an accelerator program with young ag entrepreneurs. So I'm particularly interested in the funding aspect of it, because we work with early stage entrepreneurs. So we don't quite usually get to the funding part.
Sure. Yeah, and so I think there's a couple things at Barclays, and I'll be quick with my answer. So the program I was alluding to up front, Unreasonable Impact, is essentially our accelerator. It's typically growth stage companies around the green economy, and we're lucky to partner with a group out of Boulder, Colorado called the Unreasonable Group that does a lot of the sort of curation and venture selection, but it's definitely a partnership and something we work very closely with. I think our angle is really, as you can tell from Arturo, Andy, and Lisa, kind of later stage companies that are really leaders within their respective industries and really kind of novel technologies that we think have a lot of potential to scale and have a big impact is what we're looking for, but always open to meeting new companies and new entrepreneurs. We have a couple financing vehicles as well within Barclays where we do make some investments in earlier stage companies, but it's a relatively small effort. And it's a new program we launched recently, but happy to follow up on that offline as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Christy. And Arturo and Lisa, do you want to talk about maybe how you got connected?
Yeah, well, I will share just one point on Christy, since Barclays tends to be a little bit later stage. But for really early stage investments, if there's a biotech angle to it, IndieBio/SOSV, the fund, really, they're one of our investors and have invested in a lot of other sustainable food companies in the space. And they're usually the first money in, give you a few $100,000 to get some of the companies off the ground.
Yeah, and I'll just comment by saying that the Barclays, program that I'm a part of, I'm a fellow of with Arturo, is phenomenal. I really, they support their entrepreneurs from the moment you step into the program and beyond, with connections to investors, with connections to people that you can bring onto your team. I've brought 2 people into my team as a direct result of attending some of their events. They're just a great suite of experts that have made themselves available to entrepreneurs to help them address all the different challenges and opportunities that we face as we're building our companies.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
And we had an earlier question for Annie, and this is from Marco. Marco, if you're still in there and you want to come up, I'll get started. He asked, is there a risk of a quinoa scenario happening with jackfruit? And if so, how has your company addressed it?
Yeah, happy to dive in there. So jackfruit is one of the most sustainable crops out there. I mean, the fact that there's such a huge surplus of it is a result of the fact that it grows without any inputs, it grows without any maintenance, and it supports a healthy ecosystem. So basically, it's super abundant, despite the fact that there was no market for it, because it supports actual cash crops. And so what's the solution to there becoming a shortage of jackfruit? It's reforestation, and reforesting with one of the most sustainable crops out there. That's work in progress for us.
Thanks. One of the things that we saw come up around Lisa was Megan, if you're still here, Megan said your work is remarkable, and she wanted to know if you could say more about your approach. Could you say more about how your approach is carbon negative?
Yeah, absolutely. So we use CO2 as a building block to make our proteins directly without an indirect step. And the cradle to plate assessment would give you a negative carbon footprint. Whereas with a cow, they're emitting greenhouse gases as you're producing essentially ultimately your steak that you put on a plate. So you have a steak that has a really large carbon footprint when it ends up on your plate. But we're using CO2 as a building block directly for our protein.
So Arturo, I'm going to try my best to phrase this question, but Doria, if you're still in the chat, you can come up and actually ask it. But she asked that she wondered if there's something addictive about meat that is an alternative that alternative meats don't have. Is it iron or additive or iron, vitamin B? And she's just wondering if you can figure that out, will that be really additive and helpful as well for those who are truly love meat? I hope I phrased that way.
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, Annie and Lisa, since you all do some work around beef and meat replacement, would be interesting to get your thoughts. My 2 cents. So where we've seen some of the gaps is like there are for us like the mouthfeel and flavor is really where sometimes like meat tends to outperform some of the other alternatives out there. And I think Impossible Foods, for example, has done a lot of progress around the soy-like hemoglobin protein, which is the iron-carrying protein that gives meat that meaty taste. It's actually the burning that particular protein that they've identified. And so I'm not sure about other vitamins regarding the addictive properties of meat.
Yeah, I mean, our focus is also has been on getting the overall taste, the protein levels, the texture right. I think a lot of, the history of meat alternatives is that there's really been a lot of struggle with matching the texture of meat. And beyond that, when you're making these products from water and powder, and it's a protein powder, there are issues with bitterness. And a lingering sort of off taste. And so that's something that using a very neutral flavored plant as our primary, like we're able to really just take in whatever flavors of the seasonings and sauces, et cetera. And so just figuring out how to match the meat flavor is sort of the second big focus for us beyond getting the protein levels up.
And the only thing that I'll add to that is that there are flavor houses there that actually make meat taste like meat. So there's actually a lot of companies that really have focused on creating meat in a way that it is addictive or what have you. And so there's a number of different ingredients that they use. But as Annie mentioned, texture is kind of one of the key areas where a lot of companies are focused, is texture, to get that mouthfeel, as Arturo mentioned as well, that you get when you bite into a juicy steak. So that's really where a lot of companies focus in their culinary techniques.
And so would you say, if you've all seen, Chad just dropped in a question that also speaks to a question where I was going now, is looks around pricing. So he's curious of the retail pricing of some of the synthetic food offering compared to traditional organic meat, and wondering about the loss of micronutrients with synthetic food. I mean, I feel like each one of you all could add perspective to that. Who wants to start?
We don't make synthetic food, but so we're using cultures that are found in nature. We call it a probiotic production process for a reason, because it's just like probiotics. So if you like a spoonful of yogurt, then you're eating, a spoonful of probiotics. And with us, we really do focus on full nutrients in our delivery. Nutrition is an integral part of our business. So not only having a complete protein, but all of the bioavailable minerals and vitamins and those other things as well. So that's something that we focus on specifically.
Yeah, I would say from our side, in terms of the synthetic piece, our yeast comes from a oak tree in California, and so and the proteins are the same ones that you would normally if you ate an egg, you would eat every one of our proteins that we're making right now. They're identical from a protein standpoint. I would say that the scaling piece, I think on the pricing front, and we've seen this with Impossible and other kinds of companies, is that to truly compete head to head on the retail front, or be able to undercut the traditional animal products, is that really scale is what we've seen be the biggest obstacle for some of these companies and particularly for us to meaningfully compete at scale. And that's in large part because although the fundamentals of the biology are there, and the efficiency is there, is that some of these, like the factory farming model, has had decades to scale and become massive enough to be very, very cheap. And so I think from that vantage point, that would be the biggest bottleneck. That fortunately, as there is so much consumer demand for some of these products, is that scaling is already happening, and you see that with some of these companies as they start dropping their prices. So it's also been very encouraging to see.
And Annie, before I go to the next, would you like to?
Yeah, happy to. So working with just a real plant that is growing out there. I mean, we've been able to compete directly with competition on price from the start, and we'll continue to do so.
And one thing I saw in the chat, all sessions are being recorded, and they will be available after, there's hundreds of sessions going on. So we are recording them, and they will be available. So you will have that. Annie, a lot of people in the chat are asking if you can share your PowerPoint. I don't know if it's public facing or things of that sort. If so, it seems like we'd be more than happy to have awesome. It. One question that came up earlier for Lisa was, Doria said that it sounds like what you're working on is a great solution for world hunger. Where are the challenges to drive the cost down?
Yeah, so when we started working on this, the first thing that we did was we sat down and did an assessment of the technology and the economics as we scale. And that was one of the reasons why we were excited and happy, was because on paper, it looked like we could achieve really favorable economics that could help us address nutrition needs throughout the globe. And as we've developed the technology, we've been able to hit the metrics that we needed to hit in order to realize that goal. And so with us, it's all about scaling. Air-based protein, air-based meat doesn't exist in the world today. So we have to scale up production. And that's new capacity. It's a process similar to fermentation, but it's not actually fermentation. And so there's differences between a typical process and how we're making our protein. But it's going to be similar to a brewery in terms of how it looks. So you can imagine these sort of air protein farms / breweries all over the world in the future, being able to deliver nutritious protein and nutritious meat to many geographies.
And Brooke asked a question, with big companies like Cargill getting into the plant-based protein, how do you think that's going to impact the industry? I'll pose that to everyone. Jed, please don't be too silent.
I mean, so Cargill, I think they have a joint partnership with, if it's more, I guess maybe Brooke, if you can clarify, but one of the areas where Cargill has been really active in is working with Purus as a joint venture, which is a pea protein production company. And I think from that vantage point, I think what we're going to see is a lot of scale coming into the system, and ultimately really pressure to drive prices down, which I think will be really, really exciting. I know pea, for example, has become so popular, it's become more expensive as well and harder to get access to as a protein to formulate different products. So my sense is that with these big guys coming in, is that there's going to just be an acceleration in terms of market share capture in the market.
Yeah, and what I'll add specifically, folks, the meat industry is a $1.4 trillion industry. It's a large industry. And because of COVID, analysts are saying that alternative meat is going to take a larger projected share of that industry than before. And so the demand has gone up. So we need more protein sources. We need more alternative meat production processes to meet that demand that's out there.
And maybe I'll just add one quick thing real fast. And it's a little bit broader of a point than cargo, but it is interesting to think about how some of the larger incumbent players are starting to partner with, more of the disruptors or the emerging brands, and whether it's a corporate venture fund, partnership, a distribution agreement. I think what we're seeing is some of the established players recognizing a lot of the growth and from the industry is going to come from companies like Arturo, Lisa, and Andy's. And so it's interesting. I think we naturally think there's always going to be healthy competition between them, and I'm sure there will still be, but I think there's also opportunities for partnerships, and whether it's investments or distribution agreements and things like that over time as well.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think what Jed is speaking to is far more likely, and I think what's actually happening right now today, where a lot of the big companies are trying to catch up, trying to essentially stay relevant with their consumers, because consumers are really consuming these products and really have shown a lot of validation. I mean, look at the distribution that Annie and her company already have in such a short amount of time. I think it's really a testament to how quickly the space is growing and how hungry people are to these opportunities. And I think, just looking at our example, half of our investors are strategic investors. Like, they are some of the world's largest food companies that are actively trying to innovate and develop new products that will hopefully compete, but ultimately just help satiate the appetite that is in the market today. One of the most public partners that we have is Ingredion. They're 120 countries, $7 billion ingredients company that is actively trying to supply all the brands and CPG companies to help really meet the moment.
And I think we have time for one more question, because then I want to leave for each of you, all four of you, as what are opportunities and where are places for call to action, and what do you feel is what you're working on as a call to action, and to who that call to action is. So if you can think on that while I get our last question, which I think is really interesting, is from Carol, and she said a huge part of the meat advantage too is the government subsidies. How can the plant-based food space combat combat the huge advantage so that your products can be as affordable to everyone? And is that possible?
I can start. I think that there's a huge huge opportunity. I think it's definitely possible. I think for so many of us, I think a lot of the fundamentals of our technology is using plants, using jackfruit. That's a very sustainable, very efficiently produced plant. Using fermentation the way that Lisa and our companies do. I think the fundamentals are very much there. So I think number one, it's definitely very possible. Because part of it is that animals are so incredibly inefficient. I think in large part the reason why they're able to sell products so cheaply is to your point, Keisha, on the fact that there is that it's not a level playing field right now. And one is a government support, but two is a scale that's there. And so I would say that the call to action would be twofold. One is I think that more institutions and if you're a person in a position of power to influence what's on the dining tables at offices, at universities, that you actively promote alternative protein products and plant-based products because it's better for the planet, but also for these companies that can get early traction. Two, for investors especially in the larger levels, there's a lot of seed and early stage investors in the space, but particularly at the larger, later stages, I think that there are smaller and fewer investors there. And then I think three is at the individual consumer level. I think what's happened with Impossible and Burger King, Beyond Meat is that there are and Annie's company, that there are people actively buying these products, especially when they're small and they haven't reached the full scale, is that having these early indicators that the market is there and the market is ready, and getting your families and people around the table to get excited about these kinds of products, I think is a key enabler to help continue accelerating the space.
Thank you, Arturo. Lisa?
I would say focus on where you shine. I think Beyond showed us that consumers will pay for sustainable products. And if you have a sustainable solution, really go to those consumers that are looking for that solution. Innovate so that you're delivering what they need. The larger companies aren't able to really focus on needs in the way that entrepreneurs and small companies can. So I'd really say focus on what is the core value proposition that you can bring to consumers that outshines what's in the marketplace. And ultimately, scale is important. And so that's how you start. That's how you start to build so that ultimately you can get to scale and you can deliver solutions to the masses.
Thank you.
And
Annie? Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, sure. So, I mean, jackfruit, highest yielding tree crop in the world. It's fundamentally cost effective. And so really the costs come into play with the system, all the supply chain, how are you preparing the fruit in an automated way. We've hired some people who used to be part of the meat industry, and you've got systems to go through, millions and millions of animals per week. Clearly, it's going to take some time for plant-based to get up to that kind of scale to have those same kinds of efficiencies. So between now and then, vote with your dollars and help these foods get to scale.
Thank you, Annie. Jed?
I guess I would just say is, I think what we're really excited about is just entrepreneurs. And I think the ability for them to solve some of our biggest.
Did we lose him?
I think so.
Oh, no. Okay. I think Jed froze, unfortunately. I'm so sorry. Okay, well, I want to say thank you, all three of you, we're at one more minute. So I don't know if anyone has any closing thoughts, but from SOCAP, I want to say thank you. This was absolutely fantastic and informative. And the chat, and there are so many still questions, but I would say, and I hope this is okay, you all can, at and reach out to each one of them to connect, to continue the conversation, and to ask even more questions. Annie, I know we would love to see more of your work and your presentation. We're really sorry that we couldn't get to work, but thank you all so much. And thank you everyone for coming to this great session.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Nice being here.
Bye-bye.